Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Crazy Samurai Musashi, a Japanese action flick from 2020 that stars Tak Sakaguchi, and I've reviewed a handful of his stuff on this channel. It was directed by Yuji Shimomura, who previously gave us Death, Trance, and Reborn, both of which starred Tak. Now the big gimmick here in this one is that this 91-minute film includes a 74-minute, one-scene, no-cut action sequence, where Musashi Miyamoto defeats hundreds of enemies, one after the other. So that's right, we get a 74-minute action scene that was shot in a single take. Now some websites are claiming 77 minutes, but I actually calculated the length on the movie, and it's actually 74, I believe. So the structure of the film is this. You basically get a 9-minute introduction, a 74-minute action sequence, and then an 8-minute epilogue with some ending credits. Now, Tak plays Musashi Miyamoto, but there's no character development, like at all. So I'm just going to call him Tak in this review because, let's face it, he's basically just playing himself. And I've heard some people possibly complain about that, like, well, this Musashi Miyamoto guy, like, we wanted to learn a little bit about his life and like what his philosophies are and what's going on. No, you're not going to get that. So I really picked some tough movies to review this week between this and Peninsula. So let's talk about the positives to this one. I like the scrappiness of the fighting. It's simplistically choreographed, but it makes it feel more realistic in terms of physics. You know, when someone takes a sword strike, they go down. You know what I mean? You're not going to get like unrealistic situations where people are taking tons of damage and they keep coming at you. There's no wire work whatsoever. There's no CGI, with the exception of some light blood spray that's used when he slashes people sometimes. But there are no CGI set pieces to worry about, so there's nothing really that cartoonish in this, which is kind of good. It helps to give it a grounded feel. Some of the confrontations end in different ways, like Tak sparing one dude's life, or some samurai apprentices running away after their sensei is slaughtered by him. Tak does meet a little girl at one point. I like that short scene. There's a scene of dialogue between a few of the opposing samurai that I thought worked well. Tak is actually off-screen during that sequence, which was kind of neat because you don't know where he went or if he'll pop out and kill these guys. So that was pretty cool. It kind of took the emphasis off of him for a few minutes to kind of help mix things up. And all of these things help to mix things up a bit. The fact that they executed a 74-minute fight scene, it's kind of cool to watch. You're not going to see something like this very often, that's for sure. And while you're watching it, it does become more ludicrous as it keeps going and going and going. It definitely has an impact in terms of feeling the fatigue that Tak is feeling. And you can tell that Tak was exhausted by the end of this film. The samurai sets, that they filmed in, it's a decently large location. I like it because the protagonist ventures through it while he's fighting all of these guys. It has kind of like that old school autumn forest environment to it as well. Lots of dead trees and high grass. The architecture is primarily wooden houses and bridges. So it's almost kind of like going to Japan and hanging out in that area, which is always cool. And the music has a little bit of variety to it, which I kind of liked as well. Now, in terms of criticisms, my biggest concern going into this film was repetitive fight choreography. Even in like highly acclaimed one-take fights, like the Tony Jaa staircase scene in Tam Yong-gun, you do notice that the choreography is simplified, at least a little bit, sometimes a lot, in order to limit possible mistakes during a very long take. Because if you screw something up, you got to reset everything up again and then go on the long take again. So it's not practical to have choreography like the kitchen fight in the Raid 2 in the middle of a 70-minute action scene. That will never happen as long as we live on this planet. It's just impossible. You know what I mean? Especially a scene like that requires edits to film the action. So again, you got to kind of adjust your expectations to this. But the problem I had was that the one strike moves were used over and over again. And because of this, the fighting in Crazy Samurai Musashi is very repetitive. There are some cool moves here and there, and the strikes are executed fairly well, but it's definitely repetitive. Another problem is that one versus many fights are overused. I think it would have been better to begin the film with some stealth tactics. We meet up with Tak and we follow him as he infiltrates the enemy base, hides and gets in there to kill his target. Instead, the film begins with the assassination, and it immediately throws in a one versus many fight to start the film. There's no build-up at all to it. So by the time you get to the end, it becomes pretty tedious. Now I'm specifically thinking of the fight near the wooden gate late in the second half of the film, which lasts way too freaking long. And it takes place within the same tiny little area. It's this tiny little gate area, and the scene lasts forever. And by that point in the movie, I'm all right, guys, can we wrap this up? You know what I mean? And when I'm feeling that way, when I'm seeing an action scene, that's not good. Just saying. It's almost like that scene kind of deflates the film instead of taking it to the next level on a crescendo. And since these kind of confrontations are overused, the one versus many stuff, you notice things that are somewhat distracting. Like how, opponents attack our hero one at a time, which I'm never a stickler for. But in this film, you notice it more. You know what I mean? Because that's you're seeing Tak in the middle of 20 dudes, the whole movie. So you notice it more. Now there are a few occasions where somebody does attack him from behind and he makes him pay. That happens 2 or 3 times, and I'm glad they put that in there. But it's still a distraction here. You almost never see dead bodies on the ground, which is really bizarre. That's definitely weird and noticeable. Someone will there'll be times where someone will take a hit and they'll run off screen so they could respawn and come back and fight them again. So, these are all things that are kind of limitations of shooting a scene like this. There are a few one-on-one fights. They end pretty quickly. Again, there should have been more stealth sequences, boss fights, mini-boss battles. That would have added a lot more variety to this. I think the one versus many fights were definitely overused. They do touch on those little pieces of variety once in a while, but they don't really tap them as much as they should. And I do think, again, stealth scenes would have added another dynamic, an element of suspense, and you can mix those in more. It would have really helped the film. And you could have used it all within a one-take structure as well. There was some opportunity to add some interaction, into this. I liked the scenes where he interacted with the little girl and and maybe the 2 other samurai dudes were talking to each other. You know what I mean? I liked that. They should add a little bit more of that, and it would have given Tak a little bit of a break, right? Tak's sword fighting form, it's kind of odd at times. I understand when you by the end of the film, you're so tired. Who cares about form? You're just trying to, you know what I mean? But still, he's not playing Musashi, he's playing himself. So it's, whatever. So it's, again, there's a lot in this movie. It's such a simplistic premise, but there's so many things you could pick at, and so many, which makes it interesting kind of to watch, even if you don't like it. So, Crazy Samurai Musashi has problems, like the things that I just told you, and some of these are deal breakers for people, right? Which is understandable. Just to give you an idea, and I don't usually do this, but I want to give you an idea. The online ratings for this film are atrocious. So, for purposes of comparison, Peninsula, which I reviewed earlier this week, which is a, pretty negatively, reacted to film, has a 5.4 on IMDb and 52% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Crazy Samurai Musashi has a 4.4 rating on IMDb and a 35% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So, those don't mean anything to me, because there's plenty of films that get crappy ratings that I love and films that get great ratings that I hate. But it just gives you an idea of the online discourse regarding this film. It's not good. And as I mentioned earlier, I do think there are some enjoyable aspects to this. It's a movie that I will, I might watch this again at some point in the future. But it's a movie that will likely satisfy only a particular kind of viewer. Someone who could really handle repetitious action trash. It was available on YouTube, which is how I saw it originally. but it was subsequently taken down, I think. So if you want to watch it, you'll have to wait a little bit longer until Wellgo USA officially releases it in the U.S. if you live in the U.S. So that'll be, I assume, in the next few months. But yeah, this movie kind of disappointing because they could have done more with it in terms of creativity. But it's if you like action films, I think it's worth watching just to see this and kind of pick at it. See what you didn't like, see what you liked, and make up your own mind. But again, I actually got more enjoyment out of Peninsula personally as an action schlock film. So that's my opinion on this one. And as always, I'll see you next time.